Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Monday at 9:46, November 17th. Next week already is getting is Thanksgiving, getting close to Turkey Day. So usually for me on the holidays, it's a big eat a lot of eat a lot of good food and then um, basically watch a ton of movies with my mom and dad. So that's usually a good time. That's a tradition that has been going back to ever since I can remember. Really, it's not anything new. Um, so, but it's always fun. And I typically what I do is like I go to Opera House Video. At least it's been this way for quite a while. I typically go to Opera House Video and I try to plan it accordingly as far as renting movies. Usually rent a pile of DVDs during that time, maybe some Blu-rays. I don't usually. Well, I don't. Whenever I go over to my folks for Thanksgiving or the holidays, or just to have dinner or when we watch movies, which we usually always do. They don't have a Blu-ray player, so they did, but it like doesn't really work very well. So it's always DVDs. At home, I watch a lot of Blu-rays most of the time, but I do watch DVDs. So, so typically when I go to Opera House, like I don't go there as much as I used to, just because I have a ton of movies here at the Film Fanatic headquarters that I watch, and I watch a lot of the times I'll rewatch movies. I don't usually buy them and then store them away, or watch them once and then store them away. I definitely will revisit a movie, and there's been a lot of movies over the last few years that I have, upon my first time seeing them, I've just fallen in love with them. So I'll revisit them and watch them all over again. And then there's other movies that I have that I want to will want to revisit or what have you. But typically, and a lot of the times it's older films. But a lot of the time, most of the time, well, really all the time, when I go to Opera House, it's all about new releases. That's usually where I try to keep my finger on the pulse as far as new films that are coming out. Because, like, again, there's this year has been pretty good. There's been some good movies. Well, I mean, considering the amount of movies I've seen, I've gone to the movies quite a bit this year, and some of them have been outstanding, but a lot of them have been okay or kind of decent or mediocre. It's either that way as far as like me staying up on new films. Like obviously that is, that's very much the whole thing right there. Seeing new movies in in the theater, but then I go to Opera House Video to rent movies, and I typically will get new releases. I don't usually get older films because I always watch older films here. So as we approach Turkey Day, what I end up doing is I end up having to like strategically plan like what day I'm going to go in and rent movies, because a lot of the times they don't have multiple copies of a movie. I mean, I remember back in the day of the all the movie stores that were around, like the franchises like Movie Gallery or Blockbuster, and what have you. And there was a you know uh, Tower Records, I think, even had Blu-rays or DVDs at one point. But back in the day, it was like you could, um, if you wanted to rent a new movie, you could. There would be multiple copies of that movie, so it was really awesome. But at Opera House Video, they typically, sometimes they do, but I don't think they actually do. When I think about it, they don't. They only have one copy of a movie as you go. So if that particular release is out, then you have to wait. You're shit out of luck. Sometimes they'll even put you on a list that when the movie comes back, they'll call you, which is cool. But that was a difference, like saying, going back to the times of the big franchises and all those things where you could go in and rent, like, say the new, I don't know, Vin Diesel movie came out, you could get, there'd be like 5 copies of that movie. And that obviously is very expensive to do, especially these days. So it makes sense that Opera House is not going to do that, especially being a cool, like, locally owned mom and pop place. So again, I I'm always going through movies. I'm always thinking of ideas for shows. Lately, I've been doing a lot of music shows, and again, it's all partly related. But I wanted to kind of get back into doing a lot of movie stuff because that's the main focus of this channel. And one movie I realized I've never done a show on, which I know I did. I did a show on this movie um, back when I was doing Facebook Live videos a few years ago. When I first had my first go of making live video, live content, if you will, where I would do these like live talks, live reviews, and I was doing that. I used to just have before I got really into doing this YouTube channel. I used to just do Facebook Live. I had always had my YouTube channel, but it wasn't. It was pretty inactive. I had it for like probably 5 to 7 years, and I didn't do anything with it until about 2 or 3 years ago. And but back when I first started diving into like, well, maybe see if I can do something with this. I started doing Facebook Live videos, and that was a lot of fun. I really got a lot of experience with that, and it gave me, I don't know, a little bit more confidence. And I also realized, wow, there's a lot to learn with this whole thing. And then I got into having some guests on the show. Um, and I know I've covered this movie during that time, but this is a pretty different time. A lot of, well, I think all of those videos that I did on Facebook through my page, Film Fanatic, they're still all up on the page. And there's, I don't know, I did maybe like 30 of them at one point over the course of a few years. More or less the same exact thing as that I do now, but hopefully a little bit better, and a little bit more loose. I used to do videos when I was doing just the Facebook Live videos. I would usually do a lot of preparation for the movie. I would take notes. I would have like a notepad. I'd have all of these notes, and then I'd have these key points that I would want to talk about, and then I would promote the video before I actually before I actually shot it and then uploaded it. Now I like to keep it, I don't know, a little bit more loose, a little bit more informal. One of the things that I like to try to do that really I think kind of helps a little bit is before I talk about a movie, as a lot of the times I'll watch it before I'll revisit it, so it's still somewhat fresh in my head. But the movie I'm talking about that I kicked myself for not having it on this channel is a movie that is such a masterpiece. I mean, it's hard to find things that haven't been said about this masterpiece, but David Cronenberg's The Fly. I only have this on DVD, which is really terrible. This DVD is okay. It's really, the quality's not great. It has a 2 disc, pretty standard. It's a pretty standard DVD. But at the time, I remember when this came out, back when DVDs were the rage, this was a hot commodity. And I know there's a Blu-ray, there's a 4K version of it. I definitely need to get an upgrade for The Fly. I'm a massive, massive Cronenberg fan. He is definitely one of my favorite directors. And again, this is one of those movies I feel like is essential. It came out in 1986, which is just wild. I just watched this last night, and this is one of those movies, The Fly. I have seen it so many times. I can't really. I couldn't give you a number on how many times I've seen it. It was my first movie that I ever saw. It was my first David Cronenberg film I'd ever seen as a kid. And it's so good. It's such a classic. There's so many films of his that I love. I'm not really a fan of his more recent work. I feel like he's kind of been missing the mark a little bit. His last two films, okay, and then his most recent film, I didn't make it all the way through, unfortunately. But I think going back the last 10 years, and then up until more recently with his work with Viggo Mortensen on the history of violence and Eastern Promises, and then also the movie that he did where he I can't remember the name of it, but Viggo Mortensen plays Sigmund Freud in it. Really great movie, but up until that point, I feel like every movie, or including those movies, like those movies are just amazing. But I kind of feel like that was, kind of the tail end of maybe his really, incredible career. Even though he's still amazing, and there's so many great films, and in his catalog. And I think it's easy to say that The Fly could be his best movie. I mean, it's kind of like, even though I'm not sure if I would say that because I just love so many of his films. Dead Zone, Shivers, so many. But this movie, The Fly, again, it was I remember seeing it as a kid. Came out in the '80s, um, and it truly '86. It truly terrified me. I remember seeing this movie as a kid, and it truly terrified me. I can't remember if I saw it. I don't know if my parents. I mean, because I would have been 10 years old, or almost 9 or 10. If my parents took me to the theater to see it, or I can't remember if I did see it in a theater, or if I saw it on cable or VHS. But I remember this movie was one of the most terrifying movies that I had ever seen. It was my introduction to David Cronenberg. It was the first film of his that I had ever seen. Also, the first film I had ever seen with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, and went on to become huge fans of both of those actors, and especially with David Cronenberg. The effects in this movie, the film score, just next level. I mean, just watching this movie last night, you just the score by Howard Shore, one of the great composers. It's it's so you just know, like, from the opening credits of this movie, that you're in for something that is going to be truly at this high level, when it comes to horror and body horror. It just has this presence, like it's got such a grand scale to it. And again, the some of the greatest, if not the greatest, practical effects ever seen on film, and in film history in general. Chris Wallace, along with Stephen Duplass, were the practical effects guys for The Fly. They created all the monster effects and the design and everything that entailed, all the gore, all the body horror. They actually won an Academy Award or Academy Awards for their work for The Fly, for the year of 1986. Pretty unprecedented. Um, and I think, again, this is getting back to my love of practical effects and all those things. Like, I really think um, practical effects is where it's at. I do see it coming back, and with that being said, too, I do see, or I should say, Cronenberg's influence. You just see it all the time. I mean, just such a legendary director, so innovative, so ahead of his time, and he, his influence on modern movies still you can see it. I mean, one of the biggest examples of that, without a doubt, is The Substance with Demi Moore, which came out last year, which was probably the best movie of 2024. Massive influence by Cronenberg, like big time. But it's its own thing. It's not, it's not a ripoff. But I think, and I've been seeing it in recent films, recent horror films, where there's been a little bit of a return to people using practical effects, which has been, really awesome to see, because again, it's that tangibility. There's something about it that just looks so real. And in this movie, especially The Fly, Jeff Goldblum's transformation into The Fly is like unlike anything you've ever seen before. I mean, it's so realistic. It's so. I mean, all the effects are practical. It's all like in camera. It's all handmade, but it just gives this high level of levity. And the thing that's always one of the things that always stands out to me every time I rewatch this movie is kind of the emotional levity of this movie and how well the script is written and the characters. And you just care about everyone and everything that's happening on the screen. And I always forget how. Um, I mean, this movie's so horrific and terrifying in so many ways, but how tragic it actually is too. It really is. It's such a tragic movie, and it is like, I mean, it's so entertaining as a straight up horror film, but it's like really, it cuts deep in a lot of ways, because you see this guy like literally transforming, and he's like cannot stop what's happening, and he's gonna die, and he's gonna, and he's gonna be losing everything. Um, and his, Jeff Goldblum's character, he's so brilliant, and he is aware of these things, but he has to face his end and his demise, and he's trying to like figure out, and in this state of desperation, what can be done, but then he realizes nothing can be done. So there's always that tragedy around this film. There's that deep kind of cut around it, which I think makes the movie even more harrowing. The scene that makes, and I have a, when it comes to, I have a very high tolerance for watching gore and things, and I'm, a massive fan of gore, obviously. But the scene of where it's kind of when Jeff Goldblum's character, when he is starting to really lose it or transform into the fly, the scene that always gets me and it makes me wince, and I'm always like, it's almost to the point where I feel like I have to look away because it's so, well, fucking gross and just amazing, is the scene of when he is in the bathroom and he's looking at his face and he's trying to like shave, and his skin is changing and he's getting all, these blotches, and his skin is all deformed, and he's trying to shave, and then he gets, because he can't shave, he like smashes his razor, his electric razor, and then he is like, and then the sequence with the nails, like, to me, that I think that's probably the grossest scene in the movie, and there's so many gross scenes in this movie, one after another. That's one of the beauties of Cronenberg. He's willing to go there. But for me, the scene that gets me the most, and really, to where, and again, I've seen it so many times, but each time I feel like I have to look away because it's so intense, and it just seems so real. Like you cannot. There's nothing about it that would lead you to believe that these are practical effects. This is the land of make believe, because it's so seamless, and the effects just hold up so fucking well. Like, it's crazy. There's no blue screen. There's no CGI. Everything is in camera, and it's some of the greatest in camera special effects, like, I think, ever in history. And that scene with when he's pulling his nails off his hand, is just so grotesque and so fucked up, and then the liquid from his nail shoots into the glass like crazy, crazy. And I remember this movie was when The Fly came out, it was a huge hit. Cronenberg, up until this point of doing The Fly, was obviously very, very well known, a much adored director. Had already just accumulated so many fantastic horror classics. But there was something about The Fly where it was like it kind of catapulted him into you know this next level, this higher echelon, as far as getting the respect he deserves, getting a bigger budget, getting the studio, a major studio to back him, and becoming kind of a household name, considering how fucked up his movies are. I mean, because his movies are, let's face it, they're kind of fucked up, and that's the beauty of Cronenberg. And but The Fly was, I think, such a pivotal movie for him, and in terms of, well, making him a household name. But I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a person that has never seen The Fly. I mean, that it was kind of a phenomenon. I remember when it came out. It was a huge. I remember it was a huge box office hit. It got all these great reviews by all the critics at the time. People have always loved that movie. I hear this movie still talked about to this day. In lists for especially around Halloween time, when a lot of YouTube people are compiling lists for their favorite horror films or some of the scariest films they've ever seen. So it's a movie that I find that's a tough thing for me sometimes, where I find now with like audiences and people in general, like when I think about their relation to art and music and film, where it doesn't seem like, I think uh, in a lot of ways there's so many positive things that have come out because of the digital internet age, but I do think there's so many negative things. And I think that it's kind of like this thing of where we're, as consumers for media, we're probably, I mean, well, not probably, we are definitely exposed to more than any time in history, because everything is a click away, whether it's on our phones or what have you. So you would have to, anything is at your disposal, any given moment. It's easy to find the most obscure thing or the most popular thing in seconds. So there's that. I mean, back in the day, you would have to like put in a lot of effort to find something, or and then a lot of the times you just couldn't find it, and or if you found something, there was like very little information about it, about maybe how it was made, or who directed it, or who wrote this album, and what have you, or just interviews. Now you can find, you know, if you find, like, for me, it's like if I get into a movie now, like a newer film or a new director, I'll watch the movie, and then I'll like read some reviews about it, and then if I'm really into it, then I'll like click on an interview with the director, and then get this really come across this really in-depth interview with the director, and then maybe some of the actors too, and then just keep going and going, and maybe I like the soundtrack, then I can go take a deep dive and find out who the composer was. And you can do that within seconds now, which is amazing. But I do think that finding something, I feel like people now, and they're, because of that limitless kind of information highway, it doesn't seem like things really resonate with people anymore. Like, it's kind of like, even though there are things that come and really do move people or connect with people still, and people will talk about it. I find nowadays there's less of that discussion continuing on. Whereas like The Fly came out in '86, and it's a film, and it came out in a very different time, in a very different generation before the internet. Um, it's still a movie that resonates. It's still a movie I hear about kind of all the time. So, but movies that come out now and albums that come out now, I feel like they're talked about for a day or a week, and then you kind of don't hear about them, or I don't. A lot of the times, I just don't. It's always like this thing of okay, on to the next thing. Almost this like weird digital conveyor belt of like onto the next product, onto the next product. Even though people will have that, you know, deep reson something will really resonate, or even if it's very successful, there's still this weird thing of where it's like on to the next thing, and it seems on the negative side, because things are so easy to access, it has less of an attention span, or less of an area where it really resonates with you. And I think to me that's kind of sad. I always think of, you know, movies or albums that I've seen or listened to in the last few years that I think are just fantastic. I get this sense or feeling, as good as maybe they are or have been, or the experience was, it's like within a few weeks it like totally dissipates. Even though I might be thinking about it, but I don't hear anybody talking about it. That conversation ends. It's like, okay, on to the next thing. Oh, I got this other queue of lists of movies to watch, or it's always on to the next thing where there isn't. So it's different, you know. And I think that is a cultural thing. It's a generational thing compared to when, say, The Fly came out in 1986. So it's discerning that way, and I think it's true. I think I see it. I see it a lot. Um, and I do think, you know, great art, great films, great music, great what, you know, anything in the arts does, when it's really good and it does resonate with people, whether it's a lot of people or a few people. You know, it does have a certain level of sustainability. It will be around. You know, it will like it will get its own legs, I think, over time and traction, and it will always be kind of present, or people will grow to want to see it more and more over time through word of mouth. But it's different now. So, but anyway, I think Cronenberg's film, I mean, especially the high end level aspect of this movie. The thing too that's fascinating is like this movie. I do feel like like I was saying before, this was a movie that really catapulted. I think, and I think it's totally safe to say, catapulted Cronenberg's career into kind of like commercial success. Even though this movie is not like, this movie is sick as fuck, really, and the practical effects are insane. It's a riveting science fiction horror film, some of the most amazing effects ever, and it's super gory, and it's just really depressing. Really, it kind of is a super sad movie. I always get this feeling of when you know that things are going wrong, and Jeff Goldblum's character is starting to, um, he's gonna, you know, change, and he's gonna morph into this new creature, and he's doomed. There's always this feeling like the pit, like the pit in my stomach. I feel this like deep sadness, because you just know, you know, there's nothing he can do, and he's helpless, and he's gonna go through hell. And there's always this like sense of dread when I watch this movie. Whereas a lot of horror films, it's not that. It's more just, you know, straight up entertaining, or it could be really spooky or creepy, or just amazing atmosphere. There's something a little bit deeper about this film. I'm also going to do a review on the original at some point. I might do it tomorrow. The original starring Vincent Price, which is a great film, still is. But this, I think there are examples in film history where the remake of a kind of a classic film more or less eclipses the original, and I think that this is the case of that. Like it really is something else. It's really, next level. And the thing that's like, again, this movie catapulted Cronenberg into such a level of commercial success, but this movie is so not commercial. Like he didn't try to like water down the story or like, just water down some of the aspects of this film. He just didn't. If anything, it's like he pushed it even further. And I think that's amazing. He's always, I think as a director, Cronenberg's always had his integrity. He's always worked. He's always had, even in the confines or even in the world of like big budget Hollywood, like this film is, he still has that grittiness. He started out as kind of a really independent, kind of low budget Canadian, exploitation director. And he's kind of always maintained that vision, that kind of work ethic throughout his career. Whether he's making a movie that costs, millions of dollars, or a movie that is quite a significant, up for a lot less. Like take Shivers for instance, which is a really gritty kind of exploitation movie, science fiction horror film. But it's still, to me, it's Cronenberg. It's still Cronenberg, whether it's that or The Fly. So just amazing. And I definitely need to get an upgrade of The Fly on Blu-ray. I mean, it's kind of a crime that I don't. I have a few of his films. The last movie that I got of his, or last two films of Cronenberg that I got on Blu-ray were it's The Dead Zone, which I love that movie to death, and then also Shivers. Amazing, amazing film. So I need to like. There's a few more of his films I need to buy. Well, I need to buy all of them on Blu-ray, but I definitely need to get The Fly, 1986. So, yeah. Um, if you've never seen The Fly, then you obviously live in a cave. But essential horror, one of the greatest Cronenberg films ever made. And again, I think that this movie rivals or is right on par with like John Carpenter's The Thing as far as like when you look at practical effects and what they can do, it's like kind of the highest tier. Amazing. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.